everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to make a traveler's pouch that is going to be a perfect gift for literally anybody in your life. It is perfect, obviously, for traveling, but it's also great for storage of literally anything. Today, we're going to make the traveler's trifecta, and this pattern comes to us from Sewfisticated Craft. Okay, I know, we do a lot of sophisticated craft videos, especially this year. 2025 has been the year of sophisticated craft videos, but I just can't stop. The patterns are so good. The bags are so useful. And last time we did one of their patterns, we did a really big bag. This time we're gonna do a smaller bag. However, you can make multiple sizes. It's so stinking cute. So let's walk through the pattern and then we'll talk about the materials. So on this pattern, you have a front panel, a back panel. Seems somewhat simple, except you have 3 zippers up here. So let's go through each one of these zipper compartments. First, let's start with the center one. You have a main zipper compartment. It's nice and big. Big opening on the inside. You have a zipper pocket on one side, a slip pocket on the other side. I will say pretty much all the pockets are optional on this bag. However, if you didn't do the pockets, then you kind of miss the whole point of the bag. You gotta do all the pockets. So that's the center compartment, which is nice and big. And I'll show you, this is actually a size large, and this one here is a size small. And the size small does fit perfectly inside that center compartment on the size large. I know, just the best, isn't it? Okay, so now let's talk about these other zippers. What are those for? So on the front panel here, we can open up the zipper. It's nice and long. Flop it open, and then look, you have even more pockets. You have another slip pocket over here. You have a slip pocket here. You have some elastic bands. On the other side, we have another flap that opens up nice and large, another mesh slip pocket, and then you have these elastic bands here with this plastic coating. This is only on sizes large and medium. It's not on the small, so we're gonna go into a lot of detail today on like what to put where. But if you like this, this is actually perfect for things like brushes, makeup brushes, paint brushes, things like that. You can insert your brush into the elastic, put the bristly part underneath this flap, and it protects them. That's so smart. So if you're loving the material that you see in these 2 cuties I made right here, which I also just realized is a very Wicked theme, isn't it? Like the green and the pink. I just saw that, and it's perfect timing for the next installment of Wicked that's coming out. If you love this material, everything you see here for both of these pouches, all of it for both these pouches is included in November's Bag Making Bee Club. This is such a good one, guys. You have everything you need. All the zippers, all the pulls, all the things, all the materials to make both sizes. You can make the medium and the small, or you can make the large and the small, or you can make the small and the small. You can do a lot with this. I will just warn you though, if you have the kit, you have 2 different zipper colors. You have a green zipper and you have this like beautiful black and white striped zipper. You gotta use the black and white striped one on the small size. The green one is for the large size. If you try to switch it around, you're not gonna have enough. So, also with the binding, you're going to have elastic binding in this month's kit. The pink binding is for the large size. The black binding is for the smaller size. Again, that's just because of quantity. You're going to need more stuff for the bigger size. However, you can mix and match this as much as you want. So for example, I did that here. I used black binding on the pocket here and also around the sides here for this panel, but then I used the pink binding for the flap. Have fun with this. You can mix and match all these things. So thank you as always to Sophisticated Craft for allowing me to use your patterns on the channel. I love Sophisticated Craft. The patterns are made for practicality. I feel like that's like, when I think of sophisticated patterns, I mean, they're beautiful, they're so cute, but there's a lot of bags out there that are really cute, really beautiful, very unique, but then it's like, how usable are they? You know, I mean, what are you gonna really, how often are you gonna use this bag? Every single one of Sophisticated's patterns, you will use all the time. Last time we did a big backpack that you can put your laptop in. This time we're doing this everyday travel pouch. We've done one that's like a toiletry travel bag that I literally take with me every single time I go on vacation. It is the only toiletry travel bag I use. I'll probably add this to the mix though, because this is so useful. Thank you also to the Bag Making Bee Club for sponsoring today's video. If you're interested in a monthly subscription box where you get everything, all this material, the only thing you're not going to get are my bag tags. These little shiny things that say OklaRoots, those are mine. You can't have those. But everything else, all the zippers, all the material, the binding, the exterior fabric, the lining fabric, everything comes in this box. It's so much. You get to make so much with this. It is a confident beginner to intermediate level box. It is for people who have an understanding of needles and threads and their sewing machine, things like that. This is a great subscription box. I will tell you, lately they have been selling out like crazy. Normally there are extra boxes every month, so if you just want to sign up for that month and grab that box, they're available. However, that has not been the case over the last few months. These have been incredibly popular. So if you want to join a subscription like this, I would highly suggest you go take a look down at the link in the description of this video. If you are a newer sewer, you're not quite ready for something like this, but you really want to be a part of a subscription box, where we pick all the material for you. We pick out an amazing pattern for your skill level. We also have the bag making babe box, which is for beginner sewers. Lots simpler things, still items that will look very professional when they're done. However, they are more manageable for those who are still figuring out, what needle do I use? What kind of thread is this? Things like that. It's not going to be overwhelming. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you've liked this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, any other patterns from Sewfisticated. Guys, I can't keep up with Sewfisticated Craft. I just can't. They come out with more patterns than I think I do videos. So there's just no way I can keep on top of all their patterns. However, if there's one you really want to see from them, leave it down in the comment section. I'll add it to my list. All right, guys, this is a fun one. We're going to go through the large size once again. The large size is pretty similar to the small size. The only difference is the smaller size is smaller, obviously, but it doesn't have a couple of the pockets. So we're going to go over the large one because it has everything. Let's get started. So for this pattern, you're going to need about a yard of exterior fabric, about 1.5 yards to 2 yards of lining material, and it just really depends on the dimensions of your lining material. If you're using a nylon or a water-resistant canvas, you can get away with 1 yard of that because those things are sold about 55 inches wide. However, if you're using quilt cotton is usually about 44 inches wide, so you would want about 1.5 yards of that. I'm going to be using bonded nylon for both the exterior and the lining. This is part of the subscription box, and you can actually get away with 2 of the bags, either the large and the small or the medium and the small. I'm just going to be making the large today, but I have plenty of material here to use on the small version if I'd like. So I just have a print, a hot pink, and a hot green. You're also going to want about 1/2 yard of mesh material, and then like a fat quarter of clear vinyl. The thing that you might not have the most of, that you might think you do, is zipper tape. You actually need a lot of zipper tape for this. I mean, you can see we have 2 very long zippers and then a medium and a short zipper for the large size. So for the large size, I would suggest you have 3 yards of zipper tape on hand. The pattern calls for just a little bit more than 2 yards. So usually when you buy zipper tape, it's 1 yard, 3 yard, or 5 yard increments. I would suggest to get the 3 yard. I will be using 4 zipper pulls today, but you can add double pulls on the 3 of the longest zippers, no problem. I'm just going to use 1 zipper pull for each one of those. And then you're going to want 5 yards of some sort of binding. I'll be using this 1-inch wide elastic today. You're going to need a lot of it though. I mean, you really need a lot of it. We're going to be using it as a way to hold tools, but also as the binding for the inside of the bag. So don't skimp on that. If you have to kind of mix and match colors, you can do that. I did that with my first bag. It looks great. There's lots of opportunities to change the colors around without it being terribly noticeable, but if you can get 5 yards of binding, I would suggest you do that. Then I have a couple bag tags. I have this beautiful little bag tag from Heartwood and Hide, and then I have my metal OklaRoots bag tag. Okay, so here's all the other stuff for today. I have double-sided tape. I always have 1/8 of an inch wide and 1/4 inch wide washable double-sided tape on hand. It's easy to sew over. Don't get the super sticky stuff that's meant for leather. Domestic machines are not going to like that. Then I have a bunch of these plastic clips. The thread I'm going to be using today through the needle is a Tex 45 weight thread, and it is a variegated, colorful fairy floss. And then in the bobbin, I have a Mara 100 weight thread. The needle I like to use pretty much always is a Microtex 8012. I have a lighter to clean up any little loose threads, a seam ripper, a 1-inch by 6-inch ruler. I have a chalk marking tool, and then I also have an air erasing pen and my turning wand. So let's go through the pattern pieces. Now, the different sizes have different features. For example, the large size has clear pockets. The small size does not. So make sure you pay attention to the size you're making and what you need. There are a lot of photos for every single size and arrows pointing out what everything is, but I'll also go through this. So using the main panel, we have pattern piece A here. We're going to have 2 cuts of exterior material as pattern piece A. Next, you're going to have 2 cuts of lining material as pattern piece A1. A1 is going to be for the center compartment, so the very center zipper in the middle. This is probably the one you don't see as much. Next, we're going to have pattern piece A2. This is going to be the lining for the zipper pocket that is inside the center pocket. So I'm doing totally different colors today from this first example, but I do want to show you what I'm talking about. These are the two main lining panels in the center compartment. This is the zipper pocket in the center compartment, and this is going to be the lining inside that zipper pocket. So that's what I was just showing you. And then finally, using this pattern piece, you're going to have 4 cuts of A3. Now these are going to be the compartment linings. So it's going to be the flaps. When you open this up and you open the sides, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the 4 lining compartments there. I'm not using any stabilizer here, but if you were, you would also cut out some pieces using this template for that. Next, we have pattern pieces BB and BB1, and one of these is going to be the base for the exterior, and the other one's going to be the base for the lining. I honestly haven't decided which one is which yet. I like to just kind of mix it around as I go, but they're the same size. One is lining, one is exterior. And then we have pattern pieces B and B1. B and B1 are both the zipper compartments for the 2 main zippers that go along the top panel. They're going to go on the outside of the center zipper between the exterior side zippers. As reference, it's going to be these 2 panels right here. So you're going to need 2 cuts of exterior, 2 cuts of lining. Once again, I haven't really decided which way I want to go on this yet. I think I'm mainly going to use the pink to go with the exterior, but because that's different from what I did before. I think I'll use the pink as the exterior and then the green as the interior. Then you're going to need pattern pieces C and C1. You're going to need 2 cuts of exterior, 2 cuts of lining, and these are going to be the outer panel base. And that is on the bottom of your bag. So here's the top with the zippers. Here's the bottom. It's these 2 cuts right here. You're going to have an exterior piece and a lining piece. Next, we have pattern pieces D and D1. For pattern piece D, you're going to have 2 cuts. This is going to be for your lining slip pocket. And from pattern piece D1, you're going to have 1 cut of mesh. This is for the mesh slip pocket. Pattern piece E is your grab handle. You're going to have 2 cuts of either lining or exterior material, whatever material you want to use for the handle. I would say it's completely optional. You can see on my first large version here, I actually did make a grab handle, but when I was constructing it, I forgot to install it. So it's totally fine without a handle if you don't want it. But if you do want to make the handle, you're going to need these cuts. Next, we have pattern piece F, which is your flap cover. This is a clear vinyl. And then pattern piece F2, which is a mesh pocket. I forgot to mention F1, which is another piece of clear vinyl. And then finally, we have our zipper tabs. We have ZA, which is the zipper tab for the center compartment, which is inside the bag here on the inside around the zipper in the center compartment. And then you have your main panel zipper tabs, and those are the 2 tabs on the side right here. So now we're going to work on the center compartment pockets. We're going to do the zipper pocket and we're going to do the little slip pocket. Let's start with the zipper pocket. So you're going to need your lining main panel and you're going to need your zipper tab piece ZA and your shortest of your zippers. First thing we want to do is cut our zipper tab into 4 equal pieces. To do that, we're just going to fold it in half short sides together. And I like to just slide my scissors right into the fold and cut. And then I will do the same thing with the 2 pieces that are remaining, cutting each of those into 2 more pieces. So now I have 4 zipper tab cuts. Make sure that your zipper is the exact length the pattern says. You don't want it to be longer. And then I'm just going to grab a lighter and melt down the edges of my zipper tape so it doesn't fray on me. And then we're going to take our zipper tabs, and with one of your zipper tabs laying right side up, you're going to take your zipper and lay it right side up, right over it, matching up these short edges. Use some clips to clip these together so they're both facing right side up. Then you're going to take another zipper tab and you're going to lay it right side down so it's right sides together with the zipper and include it in the clips. So now you have your 2 tabs right sides together with the zipper sandwiched in between. Do the same thing on the other end of the zipper. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and just sew along each of these little clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Backstitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have the zipper tabs sewn on, you're going to turn the zipper tabs away from the zipper so that they are wrong sides together. Flatten them out really well and grab some clips to hold this in place. And you see when you open it up, you should have like a nice long strip. Do this for both sides. After you have those zipper ends flattened out, we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we're just going to top stitch along all 4 edges of each one of these tabs at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I suggest you start on one of the raw edges so that way your top stitching is really clean along that inner folded edge by the zipper. Okay, now take one of your A1 lining pieces and you're going to measure down from the top 1 3/8 of an inch and you're going to cut that top off. So you see when you do that, you now have 2 pieces for your lining. So you have a top and a bottom. So now I would suggest you find the midpoints along the two edges that you just cut. Find the midpoints on those two edges, and then also mark the midpoint on your zipper tape. When marking the midpoint on your zipper tape, make sure you use a marking tool like a pen or something. Don't use your scissors to mark it. Now I do want to mention that this is left raw on the back. There is no lining side to the back of the zipper. There is a lining side across from it. So once again, let's look at the example here. You see we have the zipper pocket inside. There is a lining right here, but if you look at the back, it's just the back of the material and the back of the zipper here. Now, you could easily cut a second piece of this A1 as an additional piece and then cut it the same way and attach it to the back of the zipper. It's just gonna get really bulky. But if you're more comfortable with having a lining behind the zipper, then you could just sew this on like we normally would. So with all of our midpoints marked, what we're gonna do is we're gonna lay our zipper right side up, and you see it's gonna go right in between the top and bottom pieces. Make sure your zipper pulls out of the way, and then take the top piece and lay it right sides together with the zipper. Line up those midpoint marks and clip together. And like I said, if you were doing a lining behind this, you would take the top piece of the back of the zipper and you would just lay that right side down to the back part of the zipper so that the front and back parts would be right sides together with the zipper sandwiched in between. If you're using bonded nylon, don't even worry about it. You're totally fine with this having its raw back. I'm just throwing it out there as another option. Also, before you go to the sewing machine, make sure that when your zipper closes, it closes towards the left. So it opens towards the right, closes towards the left. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Backstitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have that sewn on, you're going to press that panel right side up. And if you're using material that you can iron, go ahead and do that. I like to just finger press the bonded nylon. Give it a good crease there, and then go back to the sewing machine and top stitch right along that seam at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, so now we have the top installed. We just have to do the exact same thing for the bottom. Just gonna take the bottom panel and lay it right sides together with the bottom edge of that zipper, match up those midpoint marks, and clip together. And then clip along the entire bottom edge. And now let's sew along this bottom clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once that bottom is sewn on, flip it so it's right side up. It's going to be easiest to press this with the zipper closed. Just give it a good finger press. And then once you're happy with it, take it back to the sewing machine and top stitch along that bottom seam at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that in place, if you want to trim down your zipper tab overhang on the side, you can. Just gonna kind of follow the natural curve of it. You can now set this to the side. So now we're gonna work on the divider pockets. We're gonna take both of our divider pocket panels and we're gonna lay them wrong sides together, matching up all of the edges. And we're gonna focus on the top edge. So if you have a directional print, we're working on the top of that. And I'm just gonna use some clips, and then we're gonna sew along this top edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Probably should use a different color binding for this. But now you're gonna take your binding, and I'm gonna cut mine just slightly longer than the top edge of this. You don't have to use elastic for this. There's no reason for this to be stretchy, so if you have your own binding that's not stretchy, you can definitely use that. And then you can use double-sided tape here if you'd like. I don't love using double-sided tape with elastic. I feel like it makes it doesn't sew very well when I use that. So I'm just going to hug the elastic around the top edge that I just sewed, covering up that stitching. I'm just gonna do this all the way around. So this elastic has a natural fold going right down the center of it. So it's easy to find that. Make sure it lines up in the middle. All right, once you have your binding on top in place, we're going to just top stitch right above the bottom edge of that binding at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, if you have any overhang, you can trim that down so it's the same width as the top. Now you're gonna grab your remaining A1 other compartment lining piece. You're gonna lay right side up, and then take your slip pocket and lay it right side up and match up the side edges and the bottom edges. So the A1 piece has a rounded corner bottom, and obviously your slip pocket does not. That's okay. We just need to line up the sides and the bottom. So clip these three edges together. Your pocket is right side up, your lining panel is right side up. And then what we'll do is we'll take this to the sewing machine, we'll flip it over, look at the wrong side of our A1 panel, and we'll baste along those sides and bottom edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold that pocket in place. So once you have that basted on, flip it back over to the wrong side and then just trim down those bottom corners of your slip pocket so they match up with the rounded corners. And there you go. If you'd like to do a divider pocket right here, you definitely can. I like a bigger slip pocket, so I'm going to leave this as is, and I'm going to set this to the side. Okay, so now we're going to work on the mesh pockets. So you need 2 A3 panels, your 2 D1 mesh panels, and I think I said 1 of those in the beginning, but you need 2 of these. And then you're going to need your bias tape. And if you have a tag you want to attach here, there's lots of opportunities for tags in this bag. So the first thing we want to do is we want to attach binding to the top of our pockets. Now you can see my mesh is 2 different colors because I'm using 2 different meshes, but yours will probably be the same. So I'm just going to cut my binding so it's about the same length. There are measurements for the binding in the pattern if you want to just pre-cut everything. You got to be careful if you're doing what I'm doing and cutting as you go because you want to make sure you have enough binding for the end. We use quite a bit of this in the very end of the bag. So don't overcut it by much if you're going to do my method, but also remember that this is elastic, so it does stretch. If you kind of cut it a little too short, you can stretch it, you'll be fine. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our binding and we're just gonna wrap it around the top of our mesh pockets. In the top are the longer edges. And I'm gonna use clips, but if you prefer to use double-sided tape, you can do that. The nice thing about mesh is that you just have to use 1 piece of double-sided tape, and then when you fold it over, it'll be able to reach the other side because mesh has holes, right? Once you have the binding attached to both of your mesh pockets, you're just going to top stitch right along the top of the bottom edge of each one of these at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Take your time here, and I do suggest you back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have those top stitched, you're going to grab your lining panels, and just like we did with the slip pocket, we're just gonna line up the bottom edges and the side edges, and make sure your mesh pocket is right side up. And just clip to the sides and the bottom. You're going to do this for both lining panels, both mesh pockets. All right, once you have these clipped in place, we're going to go just baste along the sides and the bottoms, all at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You should be able to clearly see where the edges of those bottom corners are through the mesh, so you don't need to flip this over or anything. Once you have this basted on, trim down the corners so it's all rounded at the same spot. And if you have any overhang of your binding on the tops, trim that down as well. You want it all the same size. All right, your 2 mesh pockets are done. You can set them to the side. Let's finish up these outer pockets. You're going to need your remaining 2 A3 lining cuts. You're going to need your flat pieces. You're going to need pattern piece F, F1, F2. Again, if you're doing the smaller size, then some of these you won't need. You're not going to be making some of these smaller ones. And then make sure you have your binding. And also, if you're not using elastic for your binding, you're going to need a couple cuts of just elastic for holders on these flaps. So the first thing we want to do is attach our binding to the top edge of our mesh pocket. So if you've pre-cut it, go for that. If you didn't, then cut to size like I am. And then just like we did in the last pockets, we're going to wrap this around the top edge of your mesh pocket and clip in place. And then just top stitch right along the bottom edge of your binding at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. So now grab one of your main lining panels, lay it right side up, and you're going to grab one of your elastic bands. And we're going to sew the elastic band in from the left side. So if you have a directional print, think about that now. So it's going to be right side up, left side. Since we're doing the large, we're going to measure in 3 1/8 of an inch. I like to just add little tick marks on the very top and bottom edges of my main panel to help me remember where that is. And then we're going to grab some clips and just clip this elastic band in place at those marks. The left edge of the band is going to match up with those marks. If your elastic band hangs over the top and the bottom a little bit, that's perfectly fine. Then you're going to grab your mesh pocket, and with the top of the pocket facing in towards the center, we're going to line up the bottom and sides of the mesh pocket with the side and the top and the bottom of the lining pocket, and just clip it in place. So now we're going to go baste down the elastic and the mesh pocket all at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have those basted on, let's flip this to the back side and just trim off any overhang of your elastic, of your binding, and your mesh pocket. Just make sure it's all one size. And before we move on, I think I'm going to attach my sew-on bag tag to this panel. So I'm just going to grab some double-sided tape, add it to the back of my cork tag, And I'm just gonna center it over the top of my elastic. Make sure it's about 1 inch down from the raw edge. I'm just kind of eyeballing that. That looks mostly centered. And now I'm just going to top stitch around all 4 edges of my tag. Okay, so this pocket panel is now done. You can set it to the side. So now the final panel for the large is going to have the clear vinyl on it. So we're gonna mark some placement on here first, and then we'll add the clear vinyl. So first we're going to work with the flat base. So from the left edge, the top and the bottom, I marked some lines that are all 3/4 of an inch away from those 3 edges. And then you're going to take your flat base and you're just going to line it up so that the long left edge matches up with that left side 3/4 of an inch mark, and the top and the bottom match up with the other ones. This is just easy placement. So if you want to use tape here to hold it in place, you're more than welcome to do that. If you just want to use the lines as guidelines, that's fine too. But take this to the sewing machine and top stitch around all 4 edges of this base at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I suggest backstitching at the beginning and the end, or tying off the threads on the back once you're done. Okay, once you have that top stitch, then you're going to grab your flap cover, and on the same short edge, you're going to match up the straight edge of your flap cover with the short edge so that it completely covers that plastic base that you just attached. If it's easier for you to mark midpoints, then do that. I'm going to do that. So I'm going to mark a midpoint over here on the short edge of my lining, and I'm also going to mark a midpoint on the straight edge of my flap cover, and then I'll just use that midpoint to help me see where I need to put this. So the flap cover should cover that base completely. Now I'm just going to go based along the short clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you have any overhang of your clear vinyl on the corners, just cut that down. So with my plastic still on the left side, I'm going to focus on the right side now with my remaining elastic band. I marked a line that is vertical 3 1/8 of an inch in from the right side. And I'm going to align my elastic so that the right edge of the elastic is butted up against that line. So I'm just going to clip this in place. And the first thing I'm going to do is just baste the ends of this down, and then we can do our divider stitches. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and just baste along the top and the bottom of this elastic at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So trim down any overhang you have of your elastic on the top and the bottom edges, and then you're going to use the measurements in the pattern to mark some placement stitches on your elastic. The point of this is to hold brushes and things like that. So if you like insert your, I'm gonna put the cap on this. So if you insert your brush into here and you flip this flap open, it'll protect the brush head and it will hold it in place down here on the bottom. So how wide you want these to be apart really depends on what you're going to be using it for. The pattern does give you suggestions. I have 4 lines marked, and now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to just top stitch over each one of these marks individually. I will back stitch at the beginning and the end, and I'm also going to leave the threads long and tie them off on the back for extra security, because this is going to get a lot of pressure if you're using it a lot with pencils and brushes and things like that. All right, once you have all your little stitches made here, you can set this to the side. So now let's start putting together all these main panels. So you should have your outer main panels, you should have your center compartment zipper panel with the lining, and then your center compartment slip panel, and then the 4 side pockets that we just did. So let's just first work on our front main panel. So for my bag tag, I'm going to install mine about 2 inches in from the right edge and 1.5 inches up from the bottom. So I just used my marking tool to mark placement for the metal prongs for this metal bag tag. And then I have a scrap piece of my nylon. You could use stabilizer if you'd like, but I always like to have something to reinforce the back of the tag, because it can, well, I need to get the black color laid out here, because it can rip your material if it's pulled on, so having a little bit of extra protection is very helpful. A couple other tools I always use with my metal bag tag is Beacon 3-in-1 glue and some duct tape, so I'm gonna let that settle down there. So I'm gonna grab my seam ripper, and I'm just going to very carefully mark slits for where my bag tag prongs are gonna go. Bonded nylon is one of those materials that you could accidentally slit, like just cut right up through the top. So don't do that. Be careful with bonded nylon. If you get resistance, just kind of stop and then start again. You don't want to ruin your material. Luckily, we haven't really done anything to this panel, so it's not a ton of work wasted, but it is material. So I'm just going to pull the prongs out of my bag tag and insert that into my marks to make sure it looks right. Yeah, that's nice. That'll be nice on the bottom corner. So I'm gonna add some Beacon 3-in-1 glue to the back of my tag. And then I'll carefully insert that into the slits. Make sure it's nice and straight. Flip it over. Add my stabilizer over the back. Add my washer. I like to fold the prongs in on themselves. If you prefer to fold them out, that's totally fine too. I find both are fine. And then I'm gonna add some duct tape over this. I'm gonna add 2 pieces of duct tape just to make sure it doesn't rub against the lining. There we go. So now flip it over, and there we go. Bag tag, so cute. And if you're not using a metal bag tag, you could also sew on a bag tag in the same section. You can put it right in the middle. You can do it just however you like. So let's go through these one at a time. First, we're gonna work on the front panel. So the front panel is the exterior panel that has your bag tag, and it's going to be the lining panel that has the mesh slip pocket and the elastic. You're gonna lay these 2 panels wrong sides together, and I'm gonna do it so that the mesh pocket is on the left, and then when I flip it up, you can see my tag is over here on the right. So exterior right side up is like this, lining right side up is like this. If you want to add any stabilizer here, you can definitely do that. You can grab some fusible fleece. You could even grab some batting if you'd like. And you could slide it in here. You could use foam if you made a much smaller cut, and that would be fine as well. But just do your best to line up all the corners and all the edges and clip them together. Okay, so front panel is prepped. I'm gonna set that to the side before I baste it. Next, we're gonna grab the exterior back panel, and you're gonna grab your lining panel that has the clear pocket and the elastic. And we're gonna lay these wrong sides together. And you can do this however you'd like. I think I'm gonna have it so that when it's facing exterior right side up, it's like this. And if I just flip it over, I'm gonna have the clear pocket on the left over here and the elastic on the right. Honestly, in the end, it does not matter which way it goes. It really doesn't. It's personal preference. Just remember, whenever this pocket, so whenever the bag is finished, this is the back panel, and when it opens flat, this is how it's gonna go. So if you're like, no, I really want this plastic up here when it opens flat, then switch it around. The front panel, when it opens flat, it's gonna be like this, mesh pocket up here. So if you want them opposite, have them opposite. If you want them the same way, think about that now. So hold it up. Front panel, back panel, open, just like that. Now, clip all these corners and edges together. So now let's take these 2 front and back panels with their lining clipped to them to the sewing machine and baste around all the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Take your time here and be careful with that clear vinyl over here. I would suggest basting the back panel at least with the clear vinyl facing up, or else it's gonna be a nightmare. Okay, you can set these 2 exterior panels to the side. So now take your center compartment with the zipper and lay it right side up, and then grab the lining panel that goes with this. Remember, this is kind of like an extra one. We didn't do anything to it. And you're gonna lay that right side up. They're both right side up. And then just attach all the edges. Now, these might not be exactly the same size. Somehow they end up being very close to the same size, which just kind of boggles my brain because we literally added a zipper into this main panel. So the math, I don't know how it works out. You'd think I would. You should have a little bit of excess on the bottom edge of your top zipper pocket here. It should be just a bit taller than the lining pocket. Just get it as close as you can to the same size. If it's a little bit longer, we can trim it down. You can see I'm doing the top and the sides first. And then I'll flip this over. Maybe you have a little bit of an overhang. I don't know if you can see it in the video. I have a slight overhang. It's probably between 1/8 and 1/4 inch. I'm just gonna trim it down so I don't have to worry about it. As detailed as this pattern is, you can actually be a little sloppy here and there, and it's gonna be fine. So now that I have those bottom edges meeting up, I can add clips there as well. So now that you have these 2 lining panels both right side up, so you see when you open the zipper, hello, there's a lining panel there. Okay, make sure you have lots of clips here, because we're gonna add one more layer to this. So flip this over, so you're looking at the wrong side. Grab one of your lining panels with a mesh pocket and lay it right side up. So it's gonna go wrong sides together with that middle lining panel, and add this to your clips, matching up all the corners and edges. So you should now have 3 layers of lining material. You have your lining panel with the zipper, you have the lining panel behind it, and then you have the mesh pocket on the back. So make sure everything, the tops are on the top, so you don't want your mesh pocket to be upside down. And then take this to the sewing machine, baste around all edges of this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, there's one compartment panel done. You can set it to the side. And for the remaining compartment, like the inner compartment panels, you're gonna have your 2 slip pockets. So you have a fabric slip pocket and a mesh slip pocket. You're just going to lay these 2 panels wrong sides together. Make sure the tops are on the top on both of them, nothing upside down here. And then just clip along all the edges and corners. All right, once you have these 2 panels clipped wrong sides together, we're going to take it to the sewing machine and baste around all the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And there you go. Your other center compartment is all good to go. Set it to the side. All right, so now we're gonna work on the center zipper, which is like the main gusset of the bag, okay? We have the outer zippers, but those are really just like right on the outer edge. This is the main part of the bag. So you're gonna need your main zipper. So this is not the really long ones. This is the remaining one that's like a medium size. You're gonna need that one with your zipper pulls already attached. You're going to need your zipper tabs. You're gonna need your 2 top panels that go around the zipper, the exterior and the lining. This will be B2. And then you're going to need your base. So this is going to be BB2. So you're gonna need your exterior and your lining base. And then you're also gonna need your grab handle pieces if you're doing a grab handle. I wish I had enough of my green material left over. I would have done it like a 2-tone because you're gonna build this front and back. That would have been cool. But I used up all my green material. First thing we wanna do is add some double-sided tape along the wrong side on both long edges of both of these grab handle cuts. So on the back of one of your grab handles, you're gonna mark a midpoint line, and on the back of the other one, you're gonna mark 2 lines, each of them 3/4 of an inch in from the long edges. So this gives it a really cool look. It's not just like, you know, a rectangle blob. It's especially cool if you use 2 different pieces of material, which I'm kind of regretting not doing, but it is what it is. So for the midpoint mark one, we're gonna remove the paper from the double-sided tape, and we're gonna just fold this back, long edges back to meet that midpoint, wrong sides together, and you're gonna have a nice clean rectangle just like that. For the other one, you're gonna do the same thing, except it's not going to the midpoint. You're gonna have it fold back to meet the marked line, and there's a slight gap between the 2 marked lines, which is what we want. So do this for both long edges. So next what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna apply some double-sided tape right along the back of the shorter piece. So we have a taller piece and a shorter piece. I'm gonna do the shorter piece where the raw edges are meeting one another. I'm just gonna add some double-sided tape right over where they butt up right against each other. And then remove the paper from that and flip it so it's wrong sides together with the other strap and centered. So they don't match up perfectly, which is exactly what we want. It gives this a nice kind of a pyramid bit, you know, some dimension. It looks really nice. I like it. So I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine. I'm gonna top stitch along all the edges, but when I top stitch along the long edges, I'm going to use the shorter one as the guide. I kind of feel like if I use the wider piece as the guide, I might not actually reach the shorter piece. So I'm gonna top stitch at 1/8 of an inch from the more narrow piece. And of course I forgot to turn my camera on to show you that. So let me see if I can get a little closer to this camera. Can you see that top stitching there? You see how it's 1/8 of an inch in from the more narrow piece, which is gonna be my right side. The wider piece, it would probably be, I mean, a little over 1/8 of an inch. Not much of a difference, but enough. There we go. So now let's work on our zipper tab. We're gonna look at the back side of this, the wrong side. I'm gonna use more narrow double-sided tape for this one. And I'm going to put the double-sided tape along the long edges on the wrong side. Once again, I'm gonna mark a midpoint line along the back edge, and then I'll just remove the paper from the tape and fold these raw edges back to meet that midpoint line. Do this for both long edges. And we're only gonna fold this that much. We're not gonna fold this again like a hot dog bun like we've done because it's too thick. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this, we're gonna flip it over to the right side, and we're gonna top stitch along all 4 edges of this tab at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have the top stitch, you're gonna fold this in half, short edges meeting, and then cut right along that fold. So now you have 2 tabs. So set these to the side, we'll attach them in just a moment. So grab one of your lining zipper gusset panels and lay it right side up, and then grab your zipper for the main part that we're working with and lay it right side up. And you can center these if you'd like, or you can just kind of eyeball it like I am. I'm gonna use tape to help me out here because I just find it much easier, especially with bonded nylon. So I'm gonna add a long piece of double-sided tape along the long edge on the right side of my lining zipper gusset And this is the edge that's going to be attached to the zipper. So if you have a directional print or a preference on how this all ends up in the end, think about this. This edge goes against the zipper. And then I can take the paper off that tape. And I'm going to take my zipper, and I'm going to lay my zipper right side up. And I'm going to stick it right onto that tape. Okay, make sure you have a little bit of overhang on both edges of your zipper tape. And then I'm going to grab one of my exterior zipper panels, and with it right side up, I'm once again going to add a nice long piece of double-sided tape along the edge that's going to attach to the zipper. So once again, directional print, think about it. And then I'll remove the paper from that tape. And then I'm going to lay this right side down, so it's right sides together with the zipper tape. But make sure you line it up corner to corner with the lining. So if you're using midpoints here, go ahead and line it all up with that. I just start corner to corner with my lining panel and my exterior, and then I just kind of straighten it out and press it down. Make sure your zipper pull doesn't get in the tape on accident. That happens so often for me. And then just give it a good press. Make sure it's all stuck together. I find that I get a cleaner sew when I do this versus using clips and basting and things like that. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew along this top taped edge, sewing all 3 pieces together at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have that sewn, you're going to give it a good press. You want to press both the exterior and lining panels away from the zipper and wrong sides together. If you're using material that you can use an iron on, go ahead and iron that. I just finger press it, and then we're going to use some clips to hold these 2 panels wrong sides together, lining up all the edges and corners. Okay, so once you have them clipped, I find it's easier to give it a good press. Make sure your zipper is closed. If it's open, it can be a little bit harder to straighten this out. But once you have it nice and flat, we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch along the long edge by the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then go ahead and baste along the short edges and the other raw edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance as well. Sometimes I find this easiest to top stitch along the zipper first and then flip it over and baste from the back. I don't know why, but sometimes it just seems easier. All right, so once you have one side done, we're going to repeat that exactly for the other side. So once again, I have my lining zipper gusset panel with the double-sided tape along one long edge, and I'm going to remove the paper from that. And I'm going to take my zipper right side up, and when I'm doing this, I want to make sure I line up the edges of this with the edge of my zipper gusset that's already installed. So try to make sure they're the exact same spot, and tape this down to your lining panel. Once you have that taped on, grab your exterior panel and attach the double-sided tape along the long edge that will be against the zipper. Remove the paper and lay this right side down so it's right sides together with the zipper. And once again, make sure you match it up corner to corner with the lining that's already taped in place. And then just give it a good smush, a good flattening. And we'll take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew along that taped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, backstitching at the beginning and the end. Now, press that exterior and lining panel away from the zipper. Line up the corners and the raw edges and clip wrong sides together. And now flatten it out really well. It is important to make sure these panels are flat before you top stitch them, or else they'll get a little wonky. It's still okay, but you know, you want it to look as neat as possible. So now once again, we're going to go and we're going to top stitch right along the seam by the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, also based along the sides and the back, also at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, after I have that done, I'm going to melt down the zipper ends, or just the end of the zipper tape, so it's not fraying so much. And then we're gonna grab our little zipper tabs, and you're gonna fold these wrong sides together. So the wrong side has that raw edge meeting up in the middle. Fold these wrong sides together, short edges together, and then just line it up so it's centered over the very end of the zipper. So not the end of the zipper tape if it's overhanging like mine is. I like to leave a little bit of an overhang. It needs to match up with the edges of your zipper gusset. So you don't want that to be too far off. So just center it, matching it up with the zipper gussets. Just like that, and now we can take this to the sewing machine and baste along these 2 clipped edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so there is the top panel. This is the lining side is the green side, the exterior side is the pink side. Now we want to attach the compartment base, and for the sake of the video, I'm going to keep the pink as the exterior to make it easier for you guys to follow and to make sure we don't get confused whenever I'm putting it all together later. However, I really want to make it green. So if you're doing this on your own, the color blocking of the pink and the green, I feel would be perfect. I feel like the green would be perfect for the exterior of the base. So please do that for me. But for the sake of the video, again, to keep it easy, I'm gonna use the pink as exterior. So taking our lining base panel, we can lay it right side up, and then we can take our zipper gusset top and we can lay it right side up, right over top of it, just like that. Match up the two short edges. And you can probably do this on both sides, honestly. Yeah, two short edges. You can see I have a little bit of overhang from my zipper tape. If you wanna cut that down, you can. I don't know why I like to have it there. I feel like like if the zipper tape starts to fray at some point, I don't have to worry about it fraying into the bag. Like there's still lots of protection there, you know what I mean? So right now I have my zipper gusset exterior right side up, the base lining right side up, just like this. And then I'm gonna grab my exterior base panel. I'm gonna lay that right side down. So right sides together with the exterior of the zipper gusset, and just include this in the clips that I have on both short edges. So now I'm gonna go sew along both of these short clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end each time. Now before we move on, let's cut down the corners of our stitching here. So now we're gonna flip this so that the base panels are wrong sides together and it's exterior right side out. And I like to just kind of tug on it to straighten it out, and then clip along the raw edges of the exterior and lining base panels so that they are meeting up exactly. Sometimes you can feel like, oh, I think the lining panel is too long because it's getting kind of lumpy. You just have to straighten it out. So just always give it a good tug to straighten it out, and you'll see that they line up perfectly. It's just that curve that makes it seem like one is longer than the other. It's not. All right, once you have those raw edges all good to go, what we're gonna do is we're going to top stitch along the seams on both ends at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then we're also gonna base stitch along the long raw edges, also at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, your gusset is all prepped. The last thing we wanna do is mark midpoints. So match up your seams between the top and the bottom gussets, and then mark the midpoints on the base and also on the top panels by the zipper on both sides. You should have four marks you're making total. I like to use scissors for this so that I can see it no matter which way I'm looking at it, but if you prefer to use a marking pen of some sort, go ahead and do that. All right, you can set this to the side now. We gotta just make the last pieces of this puzzle, which are the last two long zippers. Make sure that these zippers are the exact length the pattern says. You do not want them longer or shorter. So once again, I'm just going to melt down the edges of my zipper tape so they don't fray. Make sure your zipper pulls are already installed. And now we're just gonna make these into rings. So I'm gonna grab one zipper and two of my base pieces, so exterior and lining. I'm using the same color for the exterior and lining, so it's all the same. So I'm gonna take my zipper, lay it right side up. I'm gonna take my lining piece of this base, I'm gonna lay it right side up. They're both facing right side up. Line up the short edges and clip these together. Then I'm gonna take my exterior piece and lay that right side down. So my two base pieces are right sides together with the zipper sandwiched in between, just like that. I'm gonna repeat this with the other one as well because we're gonna be doing the exact same thing for both of these. So take both of these to the sewing machine and sew along each short clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have one side sewn on, we're going to take the exterior piece that's on the top and we're going to bring it over to the other edge of your zipper tape, laying it right sides together with your zipper tape, clip in place. And then you wanna take the lining piece and you wanna wrap it around to the back side of that zipper tape. And this can get twisted, so what I would suggest is after you have both of them clipped to the zipper, just kind of flip it gently right side out and make sure none of it is twisted. You see how it's perfectly like this? It's not twisted, it's perfectly not twisted. So make sure you have it like that, and then you can do this with the other zipper tape as well. Once you have those clipped, you're going to once again sew along each of these short edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, backstitching at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have that all sewn, straighten out your zipper so that your two panels come wrong sides together. And then this should be easier. You just straighten it out and clip along the raw edges. And once you have these both clipped, we're gonna take this to the sewing machine. We're gonna top stitch along the long raw edges and also along the seams, all at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end. I do like to start and stop my top stitching along the raw edges instead of along the seams. It just gives it a cleaner look in the end. And there you go. These are your two outer zipper gussets. So now everything is together. So before we move on, I do suggest that you mark midpoints here. So mark the midpoint on the base panels on both sides. So for that, I'm just going to fold it in half and use scissors. But then to mark the midpoint on the top of the zipper, you do not want to use scissors. So you're just going to hold those seams together, pull up, and I would suggest using some sort of a marking tool that's not going to disappear very quickly, and only mark right on the edge, especially if it doesn't disappear. You don't want this to be seen in the end. So do it on the front and the back. So do this for both of these outer zipper gussets. So now let's get all of our pieces together. You need your two outer zipper gussets, you need your center zipper gusset, you need your handle if you're doing that. And then you're gonna need your back panel, your front panel, and then the two inner compartment panels. You need midpoints on everything except the handle. So I've already marked the midpoints on all my gussets, but I need to mark the midpoints on the top and bottom and the sides of each of these four main panels. Okay, midpoints everywhere. Let's get started. Let's work with the main gusset and the handle first. Now this gets complicated, okay? It does. I screwed up the first time because of this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to baste both ends of my handle on now so I don't forget about it later. So since I'm using a single zipper pull, I like the handle to be on the side when the zipper closes all the way. That's where my handle is, because then I can hold on to my handle to easily open it, right? It's up to you. It can be wherever you want. But we're going to attach the handle. So we're gonna lay our main gusset right side up and our handle right side up. And we're gonna attach the handle just about 1/4 of an inch below the seam under the zipper. So I'm just gonna clip one side, and I'm gonna baste this side down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And now I'm going to lift up the other edge of my handle and I'm going to attach it to the other side. Now, this does create a little bit of bulk and stuff, but I can promise you if I don't do this, I'm gonna attach everything incorrectly and it's not gonna end up right. So now I'm gonna go baste down this other side of the handle also at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So before I attach this outer compartment zipper gusset to the main gusset, I do want to make a couple additional marks. I need to mark the midpoint between the midpoints. So I'm going to take the bottom base midpoint and I'm going to line that up with the midpoint mark on the top of my zipper tape, and then we're going to go over to the sides and we need to mark the midpoints on the sides over here. So once again, I'm just going to use my pencil for that, and I'm only marking right on the edge that will be in the seam allowance. So do this for both midpoints, between the midpoints on both outer zipper gussets. So since I'm using single zipper pulls here, I need to make sure that my zippers all close and open in the same direction. So I'm gonna lay my center gusset exterior right side up, and when my zipper closes, it's closing towards the right. I'm gonna grab my gusset for my outer compartment and lay it exterior right side up, and when this closes, it closes towards the right, okay? So now I'm going to match up the midpoint mark on the top edge of my outer compartment zipper gusset, and I'm going to flip this so it's right sides together with the exterior of the center zipper gusset, and I'm going to clip those together. And then I'm going to flip this up, flip my outer gusset so it's lining side out, wrong side out, and I'm just going to wrap it around that center gusset, match up the midpoints on the base panels, their exteriors right sides together, and then match up the other midpoint that's between the two top and bottom midpoints on your outer compartment with the seam between the top and the bottom gussets for the main gusset. Now once you have all of the midpoints clipped together, then you can just kind of straighten out the sections between each of the quarter marks, straighten it out, and use clips to clip it all together. So while this whole thing is rounded, for the most part when we're sewing a straight edge. We're not actually sewing any curves yet. So once you have this all clipped, we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna baste along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I like to do this with the back of that outer compartment zipper facing up. I just find it's easier to sew that way. So now, I always like to just kind of stop and check where I'm at. So now you see when you flip everything right side out, you'll have both of your zippers just like this, you see? So we have 2 of the 3 zippers installed. So now grab one of your center compartments. So this is the one that has the mesh pocket on one side, and for me, I'm gonna use the one that has a slip pocket on the other side. So we pretty much want this center compartment to sneak right in here between the gusset and this zipper. So to do that, we're gonna fold our zipper back right sides together with that main gusset. And we're focused on the edge that we just basted. That's the edge of the zipper we want to work with, okay? So we're going to take our compartment, and for the inner compartment piece, so that's with the slip pocket that's material, we're going to lay that down, and the mesh pocket is facing up. And I'm going to lay this linings right sides together. So right sides together with my gusset here. So the material is going against the zipper gusset material. Just like this. So line up those midpoint marks on the tops first and clip together, and then pull this out and line up the midpoints on the bottom. And some of this is gonna get bulky. I mean, my base down here is very bulky. That's why you don't wanna use too much thick material with this. And then we're gonna line up the marks on the sides. So the side midpoint mark is gonna match up with the seam between the base of the gusset and the zipper gusset. Clip these together. Once you have all 4 midpoints clipped together, you might find it easier if you unzip the outer compartment zipper all the way, which is the zipper that we're attaching everything to. So you can take it and unzip it all the way carefully. It makes it less stiff, it makes it more flexible to sew this together. And then just slide it around your gusset like that so it's out of the way. So you see I have it down here, I don't have to worry about that. So now I'm just gonna go around the straight edges first, clipping this material in place. And I'm focused on clipping linings right sides together. The zipper is still on the top here, but I'm not really looking at it a whole lot while I'm clipping the material in place. So always start with the straight edges first, and then we'll work on those curves. So for these corners, you're just gonna wanna push the corner of your material into the zipper gusset as best you can. We don't want to cut into the zipper at all to help it spread around those corners. So sometimes we can do that, in other steps we can't here. So you really just got to have it wrap around. You should find that it fits pretty well. I don't find that I like struggling to wrap it around the corners, even with all the thick material here. Do this for all 4 corners. Just make sure nothing gets folded in any way. Okay, so kind of stand this up and just double check that your pocket is on the top. You didn't do anything upside down. Look on the inside here. Pocket in there is good. Okay, so now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew it with the back of the zipper facing up. That's how I like to look at this when I sew it. And I'm going to stitch around the entire clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Go very slowly around those corners. Use a zipper foot, use a stiletto, back stitch at the beginning and the end. Okie dokie. Once you have that sewn on, you can zip up your zipper just to make sure. I like to triple check things because I make a lot of mistakes. Check all your corners, make sure they look good, everything is looking nice. Zippers both open and close in the same direction. Yeah, zipper pulls both closed over here. Very nice. So now, before we move on to the next step, we want to bind this. So once again, I'm going to open up that zipper all the way because it's easier to work with that way. And then I'll slide that other side of the zipper around the bottom. And now I'm going to grab my binding and we're just going to wrap this around that seam. So the next few steps are not complicated. You just need to really be careful with orientation and zipper placement, but we're pretty much doing the same thing for the rest of the bag. We're just adding panels to the zippers and adding binding. So the center panels are the most difficult because they are the thickest. The exterior panels are the easiest because it's just the panel and some binding, so it's much thinner. So I'm just going to stretch my binding around all the corners and edges of this seam I just sewed. And the pattern suggested sewing this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I do it 1/4 inch seam allowance because I know that my binding will cover it, so I'm not worried about it being seen in the end. And also, I just don't like construction stitches to be done when I'm doing the binding. When I attach the binding, this is just a decorative element. All the construction is done, so I don't really want to have to worry about if I'm sewing a seam allowance that's too big or too narrow. When I attach the binding, I want to just focus on attaching the binding. Once I get to the end, I like to let the binding overhang by about 1/2 of an inch or so. Not too much, especially because we still got a lot of binding to use here, so be frugal with this. I'm just gonna clip it in. There we go. I'm gonna flip this over so I'm looking again at the back side of the zipper that I've already sewn in place. And now I'm gonna top stitch around the entire clipped edge, top stitching the binding in place at about 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that stitched in place, just check and make sure you caught everything. And now we're gonna attach the other side of this zipper. So if it makes it easier, you might wanna close that zipper tape we're working on. And with regards to front panel or back panel, you think about your zipper placement. So when my bag closes, I like it to close all the way to the left, like this. So my front panel is going to go over here, but that's not the edge I'm working on right now. I'm working on this side, which means my back panel is the one I want to focus on. So this part's a little tricky to navigate, so I'm going to close my zipper all the way. So it's just like this. And I know in the end, I want my exterior panel to be like this, right? But the exterior panel is going to be right sides together with the zipper. So I'm going to flip this up so that the top edge of my exterior panel meets up with the midpoint on the top of my zipper, exterior and zipper right sides together, just like that. So I'm going to clip these together first, and then I'm going to open up my zipper all the way. And then the bottom of my exterior panel is going to come right sides together with the base of that compartment gusset. Clip those right sides together. Then I'm going to go around to the short edges and match up those midpoint marks, those quarter marks, with the short edges of my back panel. Remember, the zipper is right sides together with the exterior. That's important here. Then I'll just clip along the long straight edges. You're going to want to do your best to keep your clear flap out of the way. We don't want to accidentally sew over that, so I kind of like to fold it out of the way, or even just like attach a clip to keep it out of the seams. And then you're just going to stretch your zipper tape around the corners. And you shouldn't have any problem with this. I find that the length of the zipper is perfect. And you'll notice this is a much thinner seam than what we just worked with. So this should be quite a bit easier than the last step. All right, once you have it all clipped together, I like to sew once again with the back of the zipper facing up. And I'm gonna stitch around this entire clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. All right, so once you have that sewn on, well, let's give it a test run, make sure it's all correct, make sure everything is, isn't that cute? I know, it's a little complicated. It's a little complicated to wrap your head around right off the bat. I realize that. It took me a while to kind of visualize it all, but it is cool. Yeah, I want to make sure. I'm like, was that supposed to be the front panel? No, this is the front. This is the front. Opens toward. I can't remember how I like my bags. It doesn't matter. So let's open it up. I'm going to open up this panel. Let's get rid of this clip so that it's flatten out. If you smushed it all up, you're okay. You can flatten it out. And then it will lie open like this. We just need some binding to make it look nice now. So let's pull this back out. Let's grab our binding. And we're just going to wrap it around that edge that we just sewed. So just carefully wrap your binding, stretching it around the corners, and clip it in place. Okay, once you have the binding wrapped around and clipped in place, we're gonna take this back to the sewing machine, and I'm going to top stitch around the entire clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once again, I'm gonna be doing this with the back of the zipper facing up. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, you have most of your bag done. So now what we have to do is just repeat those last few steps exactly for the other side of our center gusset. So you see we have a little more than half the bag done. So So you have one side completely done. We just got to repeat the process on the other side. I am going to walk you through it, but we're going to work at a quicker pace here because we've already done all this. Let's look at the other edge of our interior gusset. Make sure you know which way the zipper is closing. So for now, the zipper is closing towards the left. So I'm going to grab my remaining compartment zipper, and I need to make sure this zipper, when it closes towards the left. So they both open towards the right, close towards the left. I'm going to find the midpoint on the top of my outer compartment zipper, and I'm going to flip my zipper right sides together with the exterior of that main zipper gusset and clip together. Wrap it around this whole center bag part, and then match up all the midpoints, the top, the bottoms, and the sides. So once clipped in place, we're gonna baste along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I like to do it with the zipper facing up. Okay, just give it a quick flip out and open your zipper, open the center. Okay, all the zippers are going in the right direction. Nice, nice, nice. So I'm gonna flip this back around. And now I'm going to take my remaining center compartment main panel, and the part with the zipper, I'm going to first put the zipper in the middle. That zipper part is going to face the center of the bag. So the mesh is going to face up. Make sure the top of the panel is what you match up with the top midpoint mark where the zipper is. Remember, we're working on the edge that we just basted. So match up those midpoint marks on the top, bring it down to the bottom, match up the midpoint marks on the bottom. Clip these together. The mesh pocket should be facing up, and then tuck in those corners and wrap the zipper around the corners. Once again, no cutting into the zipper tape. You shouldn't need to. It should go around the corners just fine. It is thick. It's thick. It is a thick seam. So that's the most challenging part of all this. All right, once you have it clipped in place, you might want to open your zipper all the way. What I'm gonna do. So carefully open the zipper all the way, and then I'm gonna pull that zipper edge down around the bag so it's hanging out on the bottom here. And this is a little tricky because we do have a lot in the way. So once again, I'm gonna have the zipper wrong side up, and I gotta really smush the rest of the bag out of the way. I'm gonna sew around the entire clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Really take your time here and just keep moving the bag out of the way so it doesn't interfere with your stitching. You got this. All right, once you have that sewn in place, zip it up just to make sure it all looks good. Poke out those corners. This is the trickiest section to sew, but we're almost done. Make sure you didn't sew over your teeth anywhere. There we go. Everything is looking tip-top. All right, now let's open the zipper all the way again, and then we're just going to wrap this seam with binding and clip it in place. All right, once you have the binding clipped on, we're just gonna top stitch around the entire clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Do this with the zipper facing wrong side up. All right, now that that's done, we only have one panel left to attach. So I'm going to zip this up to make it easier to see what I have to attach. All right, so we have that compartment done. Now we just have to attach the front panel. So once again, I like to just kind of lay it how it's gonna be in the end. So this is the zipper it's gonna attach to. It's gonna be facing out like this, but I know that I need to attach the front panel right sides together with the zipper. So looking at the top midpoint mark, I'm just gonna flip this down, match up the midpoint of the zipper with the midpoint of the top of my front panel, hold that in place, and open the zipper all the way. And then I'll bring the base and the bottom of the front panels, exteriors right sides together, and clip together like that. And then we'll do the other midpoint marks on the sides. And as you go around clipping your zipper in place, you should find that it's not twisted anywhere. If it is, you need to unclip it and redo it. So, for example, I just found out that mine is twisted. You see over here how it's twisted on this side and this side whenever I was moving it around. So once you have this all clipped in place, just flip it up. Make sure the zipper, when you flip the exterior panel right side up, the zipper is wrong side up, and that there's no twists. And we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew along the clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end, and sew with the back of the zipper facing up. So now that you have this sewn on, zip it up and make sure everything looks good. Everything is attached properly. All right, the last step is attaching the binding to the seam. So we're just going to flip this out. Take the rest of your binding and wrap it around that seam. Alrighty, once you have your binding attached, this is the last thing to sew on. We're going to top stitch this on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once again, I'm going to have the zipper wrong side up while I do this, back stitch at the beginning and the end. Alright, once you have that binding installed, that's it. You're done. So zip it up, give it all a good massage, make it look nice. Oh yeah, this looks so cool. Such a cute, cute, cute bag. And it can be used for so many different things. It's so stinking cute. It does take a little bit of time, but it's really not that challenging. You just got to be careful with, you know, orientation and following the directions. But I hope you love making this. Alright, what do you think? Very similar to the other large size. I should have mixed it up a little bit more. I just switched out the pink for the green, but I thought my thinking with this was I wanted that zipper to stand out more. I feel like on the green version here the zipper just completely blends, which is perfect. We love a zipper that's just like blends right into the material. However, I wanted that zipper tape to really pop on this one, and it sure does. Look how cute that is. I do still wish I would have used the green for the exterior because I think that color blocking would have been so good on this. But this still looks, I mean, it looks like $1,000,000, right? It's so cute. And so you can see I put the handle on this one. I mistakenly did not put it on the first one. It's good either way, honestly. A handle is always very useful, especially when you're like pulling everything out of your suitcase. It's nice. You can hang it on the back of the bathroom door if you need to. But it's not necessary. I have plenty of bags that don't have handles and I use them all the time. I hope you enjoyed making this with me today. If you make this using the tutorial, please make sure you leave a comment down below. I want to know all about it. If you share your make on social media and you want to show me, just tag me. I'm OklaRoots. I'm everywhere. I'm trying to keep up with all the social media platforms, but definitely TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. I am all over the place. Just give me a tag. I would love to see your version, especially if you have the B-box and you are switching up all the material. I want to see what you do with this. If you are pulling material from some previous B-boxes and incorporating it into this pattern, I want to see that. I love that you guys are doing that. That is like the new thing I keep seeing people do, is taking material from different boxes and switching it out with patterns and with some of the zippers and things. Like, oh, I love that we are building a stash, you know? And you guys, seriously, if you're part of the subscription box, you have the best stash of like all the best material. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.